Let's jump to presentation by Easter Parks from University of Central Florida.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yes, I should have said Parks Easter.
Yeah. It's a little confusing. It's okay.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
All right. So I'm going to be presenting on the quantification of and comparison of the rheologic properties of simulated agglutinates as a component of Lunar Regolith Simulant. This is done with the Agglutinates lab as well as the Center for Lunar and Asteroid Surface Science at the University of Central Florida. Next slide, please. All right, so to give some background on lunar agglutinates are glassy matrices of melted regolith caused by micrometeorite impacts on the lunar surface, with the regolith rapidly melting and cooling within the vacuum of space. They make up 5% to 65% of lunar regolith composition, with agglutinate percentage increasing with the maturity of the soil. Agglutinate content affects many aspects of lunar regolith, such as particle geometry, magnetic susceptibility, and mass flow rate. And as you can see on the right-hand side, this is an image of an agglutinate taken from Apollo 17 sample 71515. And they're extremely irregularly shaped, and this leads to some really weird sort of effects on the regolith. Next slide, please. So the first simulant that we're going to be using in this experiment is the Agglutinates Lab Lunar Highland Simulant, or LHS-1. This is a high-fidelity mineral-based simulation of the average lunar Highland regolith, and what it replicates is mineralogy, particle size distribution, bulk chemistry, etc. This is made up of around 75% northocite and 25% basalt, with a mean particle size of 60 microns. And there's just an image of the LHS-1 on the right-hand side. Next slide, please. So at the Agglutinates Lab, we have developed a methodology to produce simulated agglutinates. What this does is it replicates the mineralogy and glass features. There are obviously features of agglutinates that we are unable to simulate, such as ferrocastle structures and the nanophase iron, but it simulates it to our best ability. The ultimate goal of these agglutinates is to increase the fidelity of the simulant while keeping the cost as low as possible. And it's really important to note that the agglutinate development is a work in progress, and we are reporting on the flow rate effects of the prototype agglutinate formula. In no way is this final. The prototype simulated agglutinates consist of 99% anorthosite and 1% fine metallic iron. We melt this simulant, and it forms the agglutinate source material seen on the image in the left, and we crush it down with a mortar and pestle, and you get the sort of material seen in the center of the image. Next slide, please. So to give some background on the mass flow rate experiment, ISRU processes need accurate simulant to test on Earth. The agglutinates alter really important ISRU-related properties of regolith, in our case, flowability. Some technology that this may be used for is, example, molten regolith electrolysis, or any of the sort of construction techniques seen in the previous sort of presentations. And this technology for processing these large amounts of regolith requires flow data, which we gather in this experiment. The ultimate goal is to compare the mass flow rates of LHS-1 and LHS-125A, ultimately characterizing change in flow rate due to agglutinate percentage. Next slide, please. The methodology for this experiment is LHS-1 and LHS-125A were loaded into a funnel, then released and agitated by vibration motors to sort of get the simulant flowing. The funnel diameters range from 25 millimeters to 55 millimeters, and 5 trials of 500 grams was used for each simulant. The funnel was positioned over a container on top of a laboratory balance, and the laptop connected to the balance read the mass and time data as the simulant flowed out of the funnel. Next slide, please. So the data we got from this experiment, we actually got that the LHS-125A flows significantly has a significantly higher flow rate than the LHS1, as you can see in this data. This shows each of the 5 trials, and you can see that almost every single one of the LHS1 25A trials had a higher flow rate. Up near the 55 millimeter diameter, this obviously it starts to overlap as that becomes a less accurate sort of methodology, as you'll see in the next slide. Next slide, please. Yes. And then here you can see our final results. These are the average mass flow rates for each funnel diameter. And you can see that it increases with each funnel diameter as expected, with LHS1 25A being consistently higher mass flow rate than the LHS1. Next slide, please.
Hey, Hanson.
So for the analysis of this data, a two-tailed t-test performed on the data to assure statistical relevance of mean linear flow rate for each funnel size. We utilized an alpha value of 0.05, and homogeneity of variance was confirmed with Levine's test, and normal distribution of data was confirmed with Shapiro-Wilk test. The 55 millimeter data set was not significantly different, and the 50 millimeters data set was not normally distributed and therefore not compared. But that being said, the 25 millimeter through 45 millimeter was significantly different with the given assumptions fulfilled. Next slide, please. So sort of discussing the results. The LHS1 25A has a significantly higher mass flow rate than LHS1 for funnel sizes, for funnel diameters 25 millimeters through 45 millimeters. We attributed this to the shape of the crushed agglutinates as the methodology used to crush them in the mortar and pestle. We believe it rounded them out, providing enhanced flowability, which was not expected with an increase in the glass content of the simulant. We are altering the the crushing method to better simulate the fractal nature of agglutinate shapes. And ideally, this will decrease the flowability of the LHS1 25A. One thing we did learn from this, though, was that particle shape is a dominant feature within the flow of lunar regolith. And as there are no significant differences in mineralogy between LHS1 and 25A, and they originate from the same source material. Next slide, please. So some conclusions from this experiment. Simulated agglutinates are definitely a significant feature within the lunar regolith simulant, affecting the mass flow rate significantly. And mass flow rate is very sensitive to particle shape. Also, additional work must be done to achieve an accurate crushed agglutinate particle shape, as we've got the glassiness down, but now we really need to get the particle shape down to have the perfect simulant for rheology uses. Next slide, please. So for future work on this research, the new crushing methodologies are being investigated to reach more angular glass particles, and this angularity is being achieved and sort of analyzed through SEM images of the simulated agglutinates, which are actively being compared to lunar agglutinates. Also, additional testing of mass flow rate using a higher percentage of crushed agglutinates will occur in the future. For example, a 50% very mature simulated agglutinate sample versus a 25% versus a 10%, so that we can actually establish a relationship between the different percentages of the simulated agglutinates within the regolith. Next slide, please. A few acknowledgements. Thank you to our amazing team at Agglutinates in class, as well as those who support our mission to further space exploration. If you have any questions about this experimentation or our simulated agglutinates and how you can get those, please contact us at xlflab@ucf.edu or my personal email. Thank you.
Thank you, Parks. Appreciate that very much. Excellent presentation. We know from making lunar concretes, the sensitivity on particle size distribution, and one of the big unknowns is what something like agglutinates will do to the behavior of extruded concretes. So enjoyed your work here.